"Until her tears, I hired you to cook, not to act as my wife," said the lonely rancher to the native woman. The ranch sat far from the main road, surrounded by wide-open land that seemed endless. Dry wind moved slowly across the fields, carrying dust and silence with it. This place had not heard laughter in a very long time. The man who owned it lived alone, just as he preferred, or at least that was what he told himself. His name was Daniel Hart. People in the nearby town knew him as a quiet, hard-working rancher. He rarely spoke more than necessary and avoided gatherings. After losing his family years ago, he chose distance over connection. The ranch became his whole world. He woke before sunrise, worked until nightfall, and slept with his thoughts. Days passed without real conversation. Over time, loneliness became a habit he didn't even question. But the ranch was too large for one man. Cooking, cleaning, caring for animals, repairs, everything took more time than he had. He survived on simple meals and exhaustion. Finally, after burning one too many dinners and falling sick from overwork, Daniel accepted the truth he had been avoiding. He needed help. Through a local contact, he arranged to hire a cook. He made his expectations clear from the start. He didn't want conversation. He didn't want questions. Just meals, cleanliness, and professionalism. No complications. That was how she arrived one early morning, riding in the back of an old truck. Her name was Lena. She was a native woman, quiet and respectful, with tired eyes that showed she had seen more of life than she spoke about. Her clothes were simple. Her hands were worn from work. She carried a small bag, nothing more. When she stepped onto the ranch, she paused for a moment, taking in the open land and the house standing alone against the sky. It felt empty, but safe. After years of moving from place to place, safety mattered more than comfort. Daniel watched from a distance. He didn't offer a smile. He didn't ask about her journey. He only explained the rules. "You cook. You keep the kitchen clean, that's all," he said calmly. "You stay in the small room by the back. We keep things proper." Lena nodded. "Yes, sir." That was enough for him. He turned and walked away. The first few days passed quietly. Lena woke early, cooked simple but warm meals, and cleaned without complaint. She spoke only when spoken to. Daniel ate without comment and returned to work. The house remained quiet, but something subtle changed. The smell of fresh bread replaced cold air. The table was clean. The evenings felt less heavy. Lena noticed small details about the rancher, how he moved stiffly as if carrying old pain, how he ate quickly, never fully sitting at ease, how he avoided eye contact. She did not judge. She understood silence. Silence had been her companion, too. At night, alone in her small room, she thought about her past, the jobs she lost, the places that never truly felt like home, people who promised kindness but delivered disappointment. This job was supposed to be temporary, but she hoped it would last. Stability mattered. Days turned into a week. Daniel found himself noticing things he had ignored before. The meals tasted better than he remembered food could. The house felt warmer, even when the nights grew cold. Once he caught himself sitting longer at the table, just listening to the quiet sounds of cooking from the kitchen. He didn't like that feeling. It made him uncomfortable. One evening, Daniel returned late, exhausted and injured after a long day fixing a broken fence. Without being asked, Lena noticed the blood on his sleeve. She calmly brought water and cloth, keeping a respectful distance. "You should clean that," she said softly. "I'm fine," he replied, though he wasn't. She didn't argue. She simply placed the items on the table and stepped back. Her care was gentle, not intrusive, but it stirred something in him, something he had buried long ago. That night, Daniel lay awake longer than usual. He told himself he was tired. That was all. Nothing more. The next morning, Lena prepared breakfast earlier than usual. Daniel noticed, but said nothing. As he left for work, she quietly wished him a good day. He paused just for a second, then nodded. It was a small moment, but for a man unused to kindness, it felt loud. As days passed, Lena continued her work with dedication. She didn't overstep. She didn't demand attention, but kindness has a way of showing itself, even when unspoken. She repaired a torn curtain. She placed fresh water near the fields. She left clean clothes folded neatly. Daniel began to feel uneasy. He didn't understand why these simple actions bothered him. In his mind, kindness always came with a price. He had learned that lesson the hard way. One evening, after a particularly long day, he returned to find the house clean and dinner waiting. Lena stood quietly by the stove. "Dinner's ready," she said. Something inside him snapped, not from anger, but fear. Fear of closeness. Fear of depending on someone again. He looked at her, his voice sharp and cold. "I hired you to cook," he said. "Not to act like my wife." The words fell hard into the room. Lena froze. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. Her face showed surprise, then pain, but she quickly lowered her eyes. "I understand," she said softly. She stepped back, gathered herself, and left the room. Daniel stood alone, his chest tight. He told himself he had done the right thing. Boundaries mattered. Distance kept people safe, but as the house fell silent again, the warmth he had grown used to seemed to disappear. And for the first time in years, the silence felt heavier than before. That night marked the beginning of something neither of them yet understood, but it had already changed the quiet balance of the ranch. The morning after his harsh words felt different. Daniel woke up before sunrise, as usual, but the house felt empty in a way he had not noticed before. The air was cold, not because of the weather, but because something unseen had changed. He sat up in bed and listened. Normally he would hear soft sounds from the kitchen by now. Water boiling, a pan moving, quiet footsteps. That morning, there was nothing. He told himself it didn't matter. He had spoken clearly. Boundaries were necessary. Still, a strange weight sat on his chest as he dressed and stepped outside. Lena was already awake. She was outside near the well, carefully washing clothes by hand. Her movements were slow and quiet. She did not look toward the house when Daniel passed by. She did not greet him. That absence felt louder than words. Daniel stopped for a moment, then continued walking as if nothing was wrong. Inside the kitchen, breakfast was ready, but it was simple. No extra care, no warm touches, just food placed on the table. Lena was nowhere in sight. Daniel ate quickly, telling himself this was how it should be. Professional. Clean. Simple. But the day dragged on longer than usual. As Daniel worked the land, his mind kept returning to the look on her face the night before. He had seen surprise, then something deeper. Hurt that was familiar. It reminded him of himself long ago when he learned to stop expecting kindness. He shook his head and focused on his work. Lena spent the day doing only what was asked. She cleaned the kitchen, prepared meals, and kept to herself. She avoided common areas when Daniel was around. When their paths crossed, she kept her eyes low and her words brief. She did not cry where anyone could see, but inside her thoughts were heavy. She replayed his words again and again, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. She had worked hard to remain respectful. She had believed that simple care would be understood as kindness, not something else. Still, she blamed herself. Maybe she had crossed an invisible line. Maybe she had stayed too long in a place that was never meant to feel like home. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, Lena finished her work early. She stood alone near the edge of the land, watching the sky change colors. The wind brushed past her face, carrying dust and memory. She thought about leaving. Daniel returned later than usual. The house was clean, but the warmth was gone. Dinner was ready, but it was plain. He sat at the table longer than needed, staring at his hands. He wanted to say something. He didn't know what added. Quiet, distant, careful. Daniel noticed small things he hadn't expected to miss. The way she once placed his cup closer to his hand, the way she used to leave the kitchen light on just long enough to make the house feel alive. Now, everything was exact. Correct. Empty. One afternoon, Daniel injured his hand while repairing the gate. The cut wasn't deep, but it bled more than he expected. He wrapped it roughly and continued working. By the time he returned, his sleeve was stained. Lena noticed immediately. She froze for a second, then looked away. She finished what she was doing and quietly brought a clean cloth and water, placing them on the table without a word. She did not move closer. She did not touch him. Daniel watched her walk away. Something inside him tightened. That night, sleep did not come easily. He stared at the ceiling, hearing the old house creak. He realized that the silence he once chose no longer felt safe. It felt lonely. The next morning, he tried to speak. "Lena," he said as she passed through the hallway. She stopped, but did not turn. "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm, but distant. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The words felt heavy. Apologies were not something he practiced. "That's all," he said quietly. She nodded and walked on. Lena spent the afternoon packing her small bag. Not fully, just enough to be ready. She had learned not to wait too long when she was no longer wanted. Still, something held her back. Maybe it was the land. Maybe it was the idea that this place could have been different. Later that day, Daniel found an old photograph while cleaning a drawer. It showed him years ago, standing beside someone he loved, smiling in a way he no longer recognized. He stared at it for a long time. He finally understood what he had been afraid of. That evening, he stood outside Lena's door for several minutes before knocking. When she opened it, surprise flickered across her face. "I spoke out of fear," he said slowly. "Not because you did wrong." She listened, silent. "I don't know how to live around people anymore," he added. "But that doesn't give me the right to be unkind." Lena lowered her eyes. "I only meant to do my work well," she said softly. "I know," he replied. There was no promise. No sudden change, just honesty. That night, the house felt a little less cold. Not warm yet, but no longer empty. The days after that quiet conversation passed slowly, like the land itself breathing at a careful pace. Nothing changed suddenly. Daniel did not become talkative. Lena did not become relaxed overnight. But something small had shifted between them, like a door left slightly open. That morning, Daniel woke to soft sounds again. Not loud, not cheerful, just the gentle noise of someone moving in the kitchen. He stayed still for a moment, listening. It surprised him how much that sound mattered now. When he entered the kitchen, Lena was there, preparing breakfast. She looked up briefly, then nodded in greeting. Her eyes were calm but still guarded. "Morning," Daniel said. It was a simple exchange, but it felt important. Breakfast was warm again. Not fancy, just thoughtful. Daniel ate slowly this time. He wanted to speak, but didn't want to say the wrong thing again. Silence felt safer than mistakes. Lena noticed the change. He stayed longer at the table. He didn't rush out. He even asked once if the food was enough for her too. She answered politely, but inside her heart felt unsure. She had learned not to trust small kindness too quickly. Later that day, Lena worked outside near the garden area, pulling weeds and fixing a loose fence post. The sun was strong and sweat ran down her face. Daniel noticed from a distance and walked over. "You don't have to do that," he said. She paused. It needed fixing. He nodded. "Still, be careful." She looked at him surprised. He hadn't spoken like that before. "I will," she said. Daniel walked away, feeling awkward but lighter. As the afternoon passed, clouds gathered in the sky. A storm rolled in faster than expected. Rain began to fall hard, and wind followed. Lena hurried back toward the house but slipped in the mud and fell near the old shed. Daniel saw it happen. He ran faster than he had in years. "Lena!" She tried to stand but winced. Her ankle hurt badly. She was embarrassed more than anything else, trying to hide the pain. "I'm fine," she said. Daniel crouched beside her. "You're not." He helped her up carefully and guided her inside. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. His hands were steady, respectful. Inside, he helped her sit. He brought water and wrapped her ankle gently, remembering how she once did the same for him. The room was quiet, filled only with rain against the roof. "Thank you," Lena said softly. Daniel nodded. "You would have done the same." "Yes," she agreed. "I already did." For a brief moment, they almost smiled. The rain continued through the evening. Lena rested, insisting she could still cook, but Daniel refused. "I can manage tonight," he said. "You rest." She hesitated. No one had told her to rest in a long time. That night, Lena lay awake, listening to the rain and the sounds of Daniel moving around the kitchen. She realized something had changed, not because he said the right words, but because his actions were different. Outside, the storm slowly passed, but inside Lena's chest, a quiet storm had begun. The next day, her ankle was better but still sore. Daniel adjusted her work without making it obvious. He took on more tasks himself. He didn't complain. Lena noticed. She always noticed. One afternoon, while folding clothes in the living room, Lena dropped a small item from her bag. It was a worn piece of fabric, old and carefully stitched. Daniel saw it. "What's that?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then answered, "It belonged to my mother." "It's beautiful." They sat quietly for a while, the space between them no longer tense. Lena spoke first. "I've moved many times," she said. "People don't usually ask about my things. I learned to keep my life small," she continued. "That way, when it's taken away, it doesn't hurt as much." But her eyes did. Daniel felt something heavy press against his chest. He understood that feeling too well. "I built this ranch to disappear," he said slowly. "I thought if I stayed alone long enough, the past would stop finding me." Lena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "Did it work?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "No." That evening, Daniel found Lena outside after sunset. She sat near the fence, staring at the open land. Her shoulders were shaking slightly. "Lena?" he said. She didn't answer. As he stepped closer, he saw tears falling quietly down her face. She wasn't sobbing. She wasn't dramatic. Just tired tears, the kind that come after holding too much inside for too long. Daniel stopped a few steps away, unsure. "I didn't mean to be seen," she said, wiping her face. "You don't have to hide," he replied softly. She took a breath. "I try to be strong everywhere I go. Today, I just couldn't." Daniel sat down on the fence, keeping distance but staying close. "I once told you to stop acting like something you weren't," he said. "But the truth is, I don't know what acting looks like anymore." "I was never acting," she said. "I was just being myself." The wind moved gently through the land. The ranch no longer felt like a place of isolation. It felt like a place holding two wounded people learning how to exist near each other. Lena wiped her face and stood up. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," Daniel replied. "Your tears told me more than words ever could." They walked back toward the house side by side, not touching, not promising anything, but no longer alone. The days that followed were gentle, like the land after rain. Nothing dramatic happened, yet everything felt different. Daniel no longer avoided the kitchen in the mornings. Lena no longer rushed through her work as if afraid to be noticed. The house breathed again, slow and steady. Daniel began to speak more, though still carefully, small things at first. He asked if the food was too salty. He mentioned the weather. He pointed out a horse that had been acting strange. These were not deep conversations, but for him, they were steps he had not taken in years. Lena listened more than she spoke. She answered when asked, but she did not push. She understood that healing did not come from force. It came from time. One afternoon, Daniel asked her to sit at the table with him for tea. The request was simple, but it made Lena pause. No one had asked her to sit as an equal in a long time. "If you want," he added quickly, as if afraid he had asked too much. She nodded and sat across from him. The space between them felt respectful, not tense. They drank in silence at first. Then Daniel spoke. "I never learned how to live with people again after my loss," he said. "I thought work could replace connection." Lena wrapped her hands around the cup. "Work can keep you busy," she said, "but it can't keep you warm." Daniel gave a small, sad smile. "That's true." Over the next few days, Lena shared pieces of her past. Not all at once, just fragments. She spoke of moving often, of learning to stay quiet, of holding on to dignity when everything else was uncertain. And she never asked for pity. She only spoke the truth. Daniel listened without interrupting. He didn't offer advice. He didn't compare pain. He simply listened. That alone felt like care. One evening, Daniel found an old blanket folded in a chest. It belonged to someone he had lost long ago. He hesitated, then brought it to Lena's room. "The nights get cold," he said. "You can use this." Lena accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." The gesture was small, but it meant more than words. The ranch slowly changed. Daniel repaired broken things he had ignored for years. Lena planted small flowers near the house. The place felt lived in again, not just occupied. One afternoon, a man from town arrived unexpectedly. He spoke loudly and carelessly, making Lena uncomfortable with his tone. Daniel noticed immediately. "She works here?" Daniel said firmly. "With respect." The man laughed it off, but Daniel did not. When the man left, Lena stood quietly near the door. "You didn't have to say that," she said. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "I should have done it sooner." That night, Lena sat alone in her room, holding the old blanket. Tears came again, but these were different. These were tears of relief, of being seen. The next morning, Lena surprised Daniel by cooking a meal that reminded him of his childhood. He recognized the smell immediately. "How did you know?" he asked. She smiled gently. "You talk more than you think." Daniel laughed for the first time in years. The sound startled both of them. Later that day, they worked together repairing a fence. Side by side, not rushing, Daniel explained things patiently. Lena learned quickly. Their movements began to match without effort. As the sun lowered, Daniel spoke again, his voice quiet. "I was wrong to push you away," he said. "Not because I was lonely, but because I forgot how to be human." "We all forget sometimes," she said. "What matters is remembering." That evening, Daniel invited her to share dinner at the same table, not as employer and worker, but as two people sharing a meal. No rules were spoken. None were needed. They talked about small dreams, a better garden, fixing the old barn, maybe staying through the winter. Lena looked at the ranch differently now. It no longer felt like a temporary stop. It felt like a place that was learning her name. As the night grew quiet, Daniel stood at the doorway and watched the stars. Lena joined him, standing at a respectful distance. "This place was built to keep people out," Daniel said. "And now?" Lena asked. He thought for a moment. "Now it feels like it's learning how to let someone in." They stood there in silence, not reaching for each other, not making promises, but the space between them felt safe. What had begun with distance and misunderstanding had slowly turned into trust, and trust, once formed, had a way of changing everything. The season slowly began to change. Mornings grew cooler and the sky seemed wider somehow. The ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in time. It felt alive, shaped by quiet effort and shared days. Daniel woke earlier than usual now, not because of habit, but because he wanted to. The sound of movement in the kitchen no longer startled him. It comforted him. Sometimes he joined Lena there, helping in small ways, even if he wasn't very good at it. She never laughed at him. She showed him patiently, and when he made mistakes, she smiled instead of correcting him sharply. That smile stayed with him all day. Lena felt different, too. She no longer counted days as if preparing to leave. She unpacked the last of her bag and placed her few personal items on a small shelf. It was a quiet decision, but an important one. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine staying backy. One afternoon, Daniel rode into town for supplies. It was something he used to do quickly, without conversation. This time, people noticed a change. He spoke more. He listened. When someone asked how things were at the ranch, he answered honestly. "It's, better," he said. When he returned, Lena was outside, carefully tending the small garden she had started. Green shoots had begun to push through the soil. "Looks like it's working," Daniel said. She smiled. It just needed time. They both knew she wasn't only talking about the plants. As the weeks passed, they settled into a shared rhythm. There were still quiet days, but the silence no longer felt heavy. Sometimes they talked about the past, sometimes they didn't talk at all. Both felt right. One evening, a strong wind rose suddenly. Dust filled the air and the animals grew restless. Daniel and Lena worked together without thinking, guiding them to safety. At one point, the wind knocked Lena off balance. Daniel reached out instinctively and steadied her. They froze for a moment. He quickly stepped back, unsure. Lena looked at him, searching his face. There was no fear there, only trust. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "Always." That night, Daniel sat alone longer than usual, thinking. He realized that the line he once feared crossing had already faded. Not because of force or expectation, but because respect had replaced fear. The next day, Daniel did something he had avoided for years. He went into a locked room at the back of the house and opened old boxes filled with memories. He sorted through them slowly, carefully. Some things he kept, some he let go. When he was done, the room felt lighter. He invited Lena to see it. "This used to be where I hid," he said. "I don't think I need to hide anymore." "You're stronger than you think," she said. Later that evening, they shared a meal outside under the open sky. The stars were bright. The land stretched quietly around them. "Lena," Daniel said, his voice steady but sincere, "I once said something that hurt you deeply." "You did. I don't want that to be the last thing that defines us," he continued. "Not what I said, but what we became after." Lena took a long breath. "Pain doesn't disappear," she said, "but it can change shape." "I stayed because you listened," she added. "Because you learned." Daniel felt something loosen inside his chest. As winter approached, Daniel prepared the ranch for colder days. Lena helped, planning meals, storing supplies. One evening, as snow began to fall lightly, Daniel realized something important. He was no longer afraid of the quiet. One night, Lena stood by the window, watching snow cover the land. "I was never looking for someone to save me," she said softly. "Just a place where I could stand without shrinking." Daniel joined her. "I was never looking for comfort," he replied. "Just peace." They stood side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel warmth. In the days that followed, life continued simply. There were no dramatic promises, no sudden changes, just consistency, respect, care. Daniel asked Lena one morning if she planned to stay through the next season. "If you'll have me," she replied. He smiled. "I would." The ranch, once a place of isolation, had become something else entirely. Not perfect, not free of pain, but real. Daniel learned that strength wasn't found in distance, it was found in allowing someone to see you. Belina learned that kindness did not always come with a hidden cost, and the words that once caused tears lost their power, replaced by actions that spoke louder than regret. The land stretched wide and open, holding their shared silence. Not empty now, but full of meaning. What began as a job ended as a choice. And in that choice, both of them finally found something they had been missing for a very long time.